All right, folks, we just got some stunning reporting that essentially confirms what we could have guessed is taking place behind the scenes right now, but the Trump regime is in full-blown panic mode. Senior officials are blaming each other, pointing fingers at each other, throwing each other under the bus, trying to put blame on other people for the ICE murder of Alex Preddy in Minneapolis. I mean, it is a disaster, and the weak house of cards that the Trump regime is built upon is collapsing right before our very eyes. So I want to get into this report, talk about who's blaming who and for what, but before I do any of that, make sure to subscribe down below, drop a like on the video, comment, let me know what you think about this story. If you're on Spotify or Apple, please make sure to rate the show 5 stars and follow along. But without further ado, enough yapping. This is according to Axios. Scoop, blame game erupts over Trump team's false claim that Alex Preddy sought massacre and that he was a domestic terrorist. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is under fire for issuing misleading and incendiary information that claimed immigration agents killed an armed Minnesota protester Saturday because he wanted to massacre them. Kristi Noem has gotten a lot of the public backlash for this, rightfully so. I mean, 2 Republican senators have already called for her to be fired or at least resign, and I imagine that might grow. That language has now become a source of controversy inside the Trump administration. White House officials are blaming Customs and Border Patrol for furnishing inaccurate information, while others, including Kristi Noem, are targeting Stephen Miller, who is the White House Deputy Chief of Staff and a top Trump advisor. So Donald Trump and the White House are blaming CBP. Stephen Miller is blaming CBP, but Kristi Noem is blaming Stephen Miller. It's this weird like triangle or square, whatever it is, of the blame game. And it's all happening right now, right before our eyes. The episode illustrates the confusion that gripped the administration after the Saturday shooting and death of Minnesota protester Alex Preddy. And it shows the influence of Miller, Trump's closest and longest serving political advisor, whose dominion in the White House far exceeds his title. Miller's power extends to de facto oversight of Noem, though she's a cabinet secretary who technically outranks him. Noem said, quote, "Everything I've done at the direction of the president and Stephen." So Kristi Noem is naming Stephen Miller in this quote. This was relayed by a person who Noem said this to. And so she's obviously blaming Stephen Miller. I mean, very obviously, that is what's taking place here. Immediately after the Preddy shooting in Minneapolis, administration officials in Washington knew they had a potential disaster on their hands. The officers directly involved in the shooting all shut up and got lawyers real quick, so there wasn't a lot of information, one source briefed on the statement said. The statement that called Alex Preddy a domestic terrorist and that he was looking to kill police officers. And look, these ICE officers knew they did something bad immediately, despite them clapping and saying, "Oh, boo-hoo, get over it." They knew. The CBP officers on the ground furnished a report that left officials with the belief that Preddy had brandished a gun. Miller heard gun and knew what the narrative would be. Preddy came to massacre cops. So without an investigation, without having the information, Stephen Miller got out there and immediately said, "Oh, he was there to kill police officers. He was an assassin." We didn't have any information, and Stephen Miller just said it. I mean, how irresponsible. And it goes to show you that, we kind of know this, of course, but the Trump regime has never cared about the facts. They do not care. Their automatic response is defend ICE and defend Donald Trump no matter what takes place. It's always defend them. Any early comments made were based on information sent to the White House through CBP, Miller told Axios in response to an earlier version of the story. So Stephen Miller is now blaming Customs and Border Patrol to save himself from the criticism. And what's interesting about this story is Katie Miller, Stephen Miller's wife, has been reposting quotes from this article to defend Stephen Miller, including this one that says, Miller said the Minnesota operation didn't follow the guidelines established by the White House in the aftermath of the shooting of Renee Good. Specifically, Miller said the squads of CBP agents were supposed to be divided between officers engaged in the arrest of specifically targeted criminal undocumented immigrants and other officers in charge of crowd control. Miller said, quote, "We are examining why CBP was not following that protocol." So Katie Miller is now playing cleanup for her husband, and I actually thought this post was very funny. Stephen Miller sending his wannabe podcaster wife out to do damage control is the most beta shit I've ever seen. Damn right. Damn right. Stephen Miller will not talk about this publicly, so he's sending his wife out there to do his dirty work for him. Just gross. Katie Miller continued by also posting a quote that we just read from the article. Any early comments were made based on information sent to the White House through CBP. So she is also blaming Customs and Border Patrol. And Katie Miller also reposted this on Twitter. You can see it at the top. It says Katie Miller reposted, and it just basically says that the